Welcome, everybody, tonight to today's Invasive Strike Force survey training, and we're going to be focusing on species ID. I am Brent Boscarino, and I am the Director of Land Stewardship at the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. Now, there are a lot of familiar faces on this call tonight, but there's a lot of newer names that I do not recognize. So just wanted to, just make sure that we introduce the Trail Conference and tell you a little bit about what it is that we do. We are a nonprofit organization, volunteer-powered organization, been around for over 100 years, and it is incredible the volunteers that come together to work on our trails, making sure that we are using trails responsibly. We maintain over 2,100 miles of trails in northern New Jersey and in the Hudson Valley of New York. It is really impressive working in over 250 parks. The network as being part of this organization is amazing. That's what keeps us all going here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ecology side of things because we're kind of well known for being a trail maintenance and trail building group, but we do a lot of ecology work. We have an Invasive Strike Force crew that is an AmeriCorps-based program that, we'll be learning about invasive species tonight, and we go out and tackle invasive species as we learn about, what priorities and what our management priorities are in the region. We also have you all, the trail survey volunteers who have been doing this for over a decade now, and really excited to welcome some new faces tonight as well. But this going out and reporting on what invasive species are found along our trail system in natural areas that we love, recreating in, and that is important for wildlife in our region. We also have a lot of removal volunteers, and essentially we have the core crew that's an AmeriCorps crew, but volunteers come out and we'll work on things like in this picture here, removing spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive insect I'm sure you all have heard about at this point, but also a lot of invasive species, invasive plant removals in the area as well. I have to talk about our conservation dogs program because it's so innovative. We actually have a couple of dogs on staff in addition to a dog handler that will sniff out new and emerging invasive species, but also help us look for the things we're trying to protect, like rare, threatened, and endangered species that are found in a lot of the parks around our area. We also have an education and outreach wing to our department and our ecology programming. We have a trail steward program that meets people on popular trailheads, primarily stationed at Breakneck Ridge and in the Catskills, and just telling about how to use the trail responsibly, leave no trace principles, and play clean go so that we're not introducing invasive species to new regions. And we are increasingly, as you'll learn about tonight, getting into forest health monitoring. So doing a lot of work on how are the trees looking? Do we see any signs of resistance to a lot of invasive pests in the region? So we're increasingly taking that into our programming as well. And you may be asking, I mean, the Trail Conference has been around for a really long time, doing great trail work. Why the invasive species focus? Aren't we doing enough already? Well, it is an issue and that requires a lot of cooperation, and it's not just a small issue. So first of all, just want to make sure that we're defining what an invasive species is. An invasive species is a species that's basically transported from another region of the world and brought to a new area. And becomes established. It starts to spread rapidly and is going to threaten local biodiversity. It has large economic ramifications as well as like human health issues. I talked about spotted lanternfly, for example, that secretes like a honeydew and then attracts stinging insects. That's just one example of how invasive species, not only are we worried about it ecologically, but big impacts from an economic and recreation and even social perspective as well. And so what I want to do for you tonight is to show you a little bit of a documentary. It's a great documentary that was made specific for New York State, but really applies to invasive species and a lot of the issues that we're dealing with here to kind of set the table for why we are discussing this and what you all are going to be doing as volunteers and why it's so important. Why should we care about invasive species? Now, anytime I play YouTube over Zoom, it might get a little jumpy, but you're going to get the basic definitions and idea from what I'm playing here. And this is what I mentioned before, right? So something from a new region that moves to an area where it has no natural predators, pathogens, and in this ecosystem where it's just not evolved to be. And so it kind of runs rampant and starts causing issues.
The natural world is complicated. The water, weather, plants, animals, all are influenced by countless variables over millions of years to help guide their behavior. And what we do know is, for the most part, living things are a product of their environment. They've evolved over time with the species around them. They know the rules, they know the players, and they found ways to coexist. When an invasive species comes into play, things change.
This is a great example of kudzu, which you actually have in the lower Hudson area and parts of New Jersey as well. It's just completely blanketing these trees, just an invasive vine to the point where you can't even tell what's growing underneath it.
When we think about introduced species that arrive somewhere, we're often worried about that they break the rules of the game. The checks and balances that you have is being broken by species that arrive without their suite of natural predators or diseases. So then they can outcompete a lot of the native species, become super abundant, and create ecological or economic problems.
The big problem with invasive species, particularly invasive plants, their definition, by definition, they are non-native plants. So they're coming from someplace else, which means any of the insects here have never seen them before, that they don't have the adaptations to be able to get around their particular chemical defenses. And the other part of the definition of an invasive plant is that it's aggressively displacing native plants. So you have a plant, and around here it's typically from Asia, from China, that is aggressively pushing out the plants that are now supporting the wildlife around us. They look like plants, they look like they're contributing to the local ecosystem, but almost nothing can eat them.
So there's lots of different ways that invasive species can end up here. Of course, there's a lot of unintentional hitchhikers that maybe, come over on a cargo ship or come over on the wooden pallets that are holding a lot of our goods.
And this pallet stuff and coming into a lot of the ports, we are in a large metropolitan area, how a lot of the introduced species come here, and it could just be by accident, egg masses being on shipping crates. And this is something that we're actively working on, but government needs to work together, and with state agencies and nonprofits to make an even bigger difference to prevent things from coming in here that can cause a lot of economic and ecological problems, but just by hitchhiking on like shipping equipment.
But there's also a lot of intentional introductions. We might order these in over the internet. You might want like a new tropical fish or some interesting aquatic plants for your aquarium, for example. But what happens when you can no longer take care of it or you need to move? In many cases, a lot of times these get dumped into a local water body. Now you've introduced a new fish species or a new plant species that can easily take over because that lake or that water body is not adapted to that new species.
So this is just a couple of examples of how they can get here and some of the issues that they can cause, right? So going back to the PowerPoint and talking about it is that you're probably all here because we all love the outdoors. We love the nature experience, right? And a lot of the trails and vistas that we enjoy visiting and the wildlife depend on these natural spaces. Again, are being swallowed and threatened by a lot of the pests. We talk about forest pests, and we'll talk about a few tonight, and the plants, as you learned about in the video. And just as an example here, as to how they get introduced, it's often a lot of the ornamental plants that you put on pergolas to make to make properties look nice. And it might be like, oh, I'm taking care of that on my property, like it's in this picture. But it's important to realize that birds will come and eat these berries, and other wildlife will, and then fly off into natural areas and natural spaces, and then disperse those seeds, and all of a sudden now you've got an issue where you've got this vine, which is bittersweet, invasive bittersweet, now swallowing this tree to the point where you can't even tell where that's growing. Or you've got forest pests that are coming in this nice native ecosystem and then completely devastating, large swaths and causing these like almost ghosts in the forest of dead trees due to a forest pest kind of sucking the life out of these trees. So it became apparent that these are threats that were just beyond standard trail maintenance and what the Trail Conference had been doing for a long time. And New York State in particular, realized that we really required a coordinated approach at a regional level to really do something about this issue. And that's where the PRISMs came in. So this is a big acronym for Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. And New York set these aside, and there's just 8 different geographic areas in which these PRISMs are. And you've got to think about it as almost like an alliance or a coalition of environmental organizations, engaged community members, state agencies that are working together to solve a lot of the problems that are caused by invasive species. And these PRISM networks essentially need a lead organization to coordinate that effort. It's sharing stories, experience to make sure that we are prioritizing the right things in our region. And that's where the Trail Conference stepped in. We have been over 100-year history of volunteers working together, lots of partnerships with local organizations, a presence in New Jersey. And so we essentially are the head or host organization for the Lower Hudson PRISM in New York State. And through that contract that we have with DEC, formed what was called the Invasive Strike Force, which is basically a volunteer organization that was begun to track the spread of invasive species in forested parklands in northern New Jersey and in the lower Hudson region of New York, in an effort to protect our native habitats and ecosystems from the threat of invasive species. And what an amazing group this has been. I've been working for Lower Hudson PRISM since 2018, and it's really the relationships and the community members and partners involved in this partnership that really, it's so inspiring, everyone. I don't know what else to say. Like this is a partnership that exists between 59 different regional partners. So you're talking about state agencies, nonprofits, some schools, research institutions, and of course, the volunteer network. If you look at this graphic to the right, just in last year alone, over 10,000 different volunteers working on just invasive species issues alone, giving over 33,000 hours. I mean, it is incredible what unique and robust presence that we have here in the Lower Hudson and in northern New Jersey of people working together and caring about these natural lands. And so you've got an issue like invasive species that seems so big. And then you see the people and the organizations working together and you're seeing the difference on the ground. So many of the preserves and parks here, like good people working together for solutions to some of these issues in a priority type of way, making sure that we are prioritizing things correctly and talking, swapping stories and learning from each other. So that's the introduction. That's why we're here. That's hopefully why you're here. It's a cooperative, collaborative, type of relationship where I'm learning from the volunteers, you're learning from me as to what we need to prioritize, and we're learning from you as to what's on the ground. How is it changing? And we really need a network in order to do that. So it is time to introduce this year's list, and I'm really excited this year because there's a lot of exciting changes and things that we are going to be looking for that we've never looked for before, and then some nuances to some of the stuff that we've done in the past. So let's get right into it. First species of 2024, we are going to look at some invasive and native shrubs, but we'll start with the invasive shrubs first. And we are going to be talking a lot tonight about viburnums. And I've learned so much about this, about viburnums. I know it's really beloved in the native plant community. There's some wonderful viburnums out there, but there's also a couple that we are a little bit concerned about and are spreading from captivity that we're trying to keep out of our natural areas. So we're going to break that down a little bit tonight and hopefully come away with this feeling inspired and ready to go. So we're going to talk about a lot of viburnums tonight. So let's talk about some of the, the characteristics that most of them will share. First of all, viburnums have leaves that are opposite from one another. And if you can see me on the screen, It's just like putting your two palms together, leaves coming out opposite like this, with, but your hands pointing out. And right in the middle where my palms will meet, right, there's going to be a little flower cluster that's coming out for it. That is what your eye needs to be looking for. And the good thing about starting the survey right now is that a lot of the viburnums are blooming. If you see a little cluster of flowers in between opposite leaves, it's most likely a viburnum. And the flowers are arranged in these little clusters or umbel-like flower clusters, flower structures that I'll give you a little, I don't know, kind of a goofy introduction to here, as to how to remember it and know what you are looking for. So let's get started. And again, I'm going to play a lot of videos for you tonight. And so it might be a little jumpy, but especially when the camera goes in up close, you'll be able to see it pretty clearly. So let's get started. What are viburnums and what are our eyes got to be looking for?
You may be wondering why I'm standing here with these three objects. I've got a diamond, a broccoli crowned, and an umbrella. Well, the reason why is I'm going to teach you about our focal species in the month of June, and also our EcoQuest Challenge species.
So some of you may remember the EcoQuest Challenge, where we put out challenges to our volunteers each month, but this is now going to be part of our standard survey program for the year. So when I say EcoQuest, that's what I mean.
Are a class of plants called viburnums, and you can see them behind me. This is a maple leaf viburnum, but I'll be teaching you about some of the differences, how to tell some of the natives, like the maple leaf viburnum behind me, from the invasive shrubs. And the reason why I got this broccoli crown here is that the flower structures and flower clusters that you see in viburnums often resemble sort of this either a dome-shaped group of florets or a more like flat top cluster of those flowers. And then the reason why I've got the umbrella here is that actually the technical term for some of the flower clusters on viburnums are called umbel-like flower structures, in which you've got these long stalks that originate from one central point.
So like the spokes of the umbrella, right? You kind of one flower, basically branch here, then branching off from just that one stalk. That's kind of that umbel-like structure that is reminiscent of umbrella. So that's how I always remember it. This kind of like dome shaped. And again, talking about whether it's the flat top of a diamond or more like a broccoli crown, or looking at this umbrella, that is what your eyes need to focus in on, is that flower cluster. So it's a little bit about the viburnums in general. And again, they're blooming, like a lot of them are blooming right now. And it's really exciting and kind of fun to be on the lookout for them, even as you're driving along the road. All right. So that is the viburnums in general. So just remember, broccoli crowns, diamond shape, umbrellas, umbel-like structures, right? So that's what our eyes are cued into. All right. Now the two invasive viburnums that we're going to be focusing on are linden and Siebold's viburnum. Now I'm going to do a really quick introduction now, then we're going to get to some videos of some potted plants that I have to tell them apart. So you can jot these as the two invasive viburnums that we're going to be looking at tonight. But again, I'm really excited this year because we are putting the emphasis on the positive, because it's not just about looking for the invasive species and then removing them. We have to remind ourselves of what it is that we are trying to protect out there. And we're going to learn 5 different native viburnums to report on this year. And you will see just how beautiful they are, how much they matter to wildlife. And there's literally no reason why we need the invasive viburnums in our ecosystems when there's so many beautiful native ones as well. So these are the 5 that we're going to be talking about today. All right, now let's get to it. How do you tell the difference between these viburnums? And this should be really fun, like getting into the weeds and details of how to go about and do this. So let's go to our next part of the video here. Just let me get this set up and no. Oh, that's not it. Wrong video. Here we go. Okay, we'll be talking about Siebold's and linden viburnum. Here we go.
Look at some others. Here's a look at one of our first invasive viburnums, and I could not get a picture of this out on the trail and in the wild, but I do have a potted version of it. What we are looking at here is linden viburnum, and you can see that the flowers are going to be starting to bloom. And again, this sort of like flat-topped cluster to them. But what is going to distinguish linden viburnum from some of the other natives is a really kind of soft, nice and soft feel to its leaves. If I'm feeling this, it almost feels like a velvet to it, and soft and hairy. And actually, if you zoom in very, very close, you can almost see the finest hair.
You see those hairs there? I mean, it's really obvious. The linden viburnum, so hairy, soft, velvety.
That are on it. But the way that I remember that is by thinking, like soft linens. Well, this is linden viburnum, linden and linen. That's a good way to remember it. Another way to tell that you're looking at linden viburnum, again, which is one of the invasive viburnums on our list. You can take a look at the edges of this. It almost has like a scalloped edge appearance, like a scallop you would find in the ocean. See how it's got teeth, but it's more of a scalloped edge to it. Let's take a look at another leaf down here. And again, I'm feeling how soft it is. Sometimes it will come to a point, but while it does have teeth, they're not going to be nearly deeply as toothed as some of the other lookalikes like arrowwood viburnum. And just to point out again, opposite leaf arrangement along the stem. You can see that on each of these, that each of the leaves are coming up opposite of one.
So you see how they're paired along the branch there? That's what that means, and they're coming out just almost from a central point, just like I had my palms like this.
One another, as well as opposite branching on all of the viburnums. So those are features to look for: soft, linen, linden. Right here next.
Okay, I'm going to jump a little bit now to the difference between that and the native viburnum that I'm going to tell you about in a second, and then we'll get to the second invasive. So don't worry, I'll get back to the PowerPoint in a second, but it's really good to see these two right next to each other so you can tell the difference.
To the linden viburnum, the invasive linden viburnum is a native called arrowwood viburnum. And you can see as they're next to each other why they would be confused for one another. But again, linden, very soft. And as I'm feeling arrowwood, it just doesn't have that soft velvety feel to it. And you notice how the edges or margins of this, they're much more deeply toothed.
So you see these deep grooves here. Hopefully you can see my cursor, but it's almost like a zigzag-like appearance to the arrowwood.
Then we see right here next to it in the linden viburnum. So with our native arrowwoods, you'll notice like much more deeply toothed margins of it, and just doesn't have that soft hair or the more like scalloped edges of the linden viburnum. So those are one of the main differences. Also, if you take a look at the leaves of this, do you see all the holes that have been punctured in here? Well, that is actually caused by an invasive insect called the viburnum leaf beetle. And they tend to really just feed on the native viburnums like this arrowwood viburnum. And if you'll notice right next to it, you will not see these sort of like bullet holes in the invasive one. Another reason why these invasives have an edge over some of our native viburnums. So again, arrowwood does have a point, and some of the lindens will have points as well, but really with the arrowwoods, you got deeply toothed margins and just doesn't have that soft velvety feel to it. The last invasive viburnum to be looking for during this month of June in our EcoQuest challenge is this one here. This is Siebold's viburnum.
Okay, so this is the second invasive viburnum that we'll be learning about. Then we're going to learn about a whole host of native ones.
And you'll notice some of the key differences between the linden and the native arrowwoods that I just showed you. You see how the leaves of the Siebold's viburnum are much more elongated than what we are seeing over here with the arrowwoods and the linden viburnums, right? Much more elongated leaves, but honestly, what is the dead giveaway in this instance is the smell. You rub your fingers, even come up next to it, burnt rubber, and is very, very strong. So
you don't even need to touch this plant to know that you are in the vicinity of Siebold's viburnum. Like, you can smell burned rubber just by being near it, if there's any wind at all. If you've kind of dealt with a tree of heaven before, it's kind of that like burnt rubbery smell when you cut down an ailanthus or tree of heaven, but it's even more pungent.
Elongated leaves, toothed margins, and a burnt rubber smell. And the way that I remember that, sea bolds viburnum, which is our invasive, sea bolds has a bold smell, just like our linden viburnum is soft like linen. So just some trick.
You know, I used to be a teacher, so I like mnemonic devices and little tricks to help you remember things. So, you know, if that helps, bold smell, sea bolds, linen, linden for softness. Those are the two main ones for our invasive species. Now, for those of you who like, you know, again, we're going to be providing all these resources for you, including slides and guides for you. But just a reminder, the linden viburnum, what I didn't get to show you is that if you do go out surveying in September, those berries are going to be bright red. But, you know, a lot of the same characteristics that you're going to be finding now, scalloped edges, soft, hairy, but the fruit is going to be red. And Seabold's viburnum, again, smells like burnt rubber. I'm just putting these as slides as opposed to in the description so that you have it as a resource to go back and check. And we're going to be giving you a colored printed guide when the time comes for your survey. All right, we also talked about arrowwood viburnum. We're getting into the natives now, right? Just remember those deep teeth and those little bullet holes that that the beetle will have. You can see it in this photo as well, but really kind of deep to the margins to the arrowwood. And again, this is one of your native species, and you'll see out along the trails. I see arrowwood viburnums quite a bit, and they're about to bloom. All right, y'all ready for a new native species that we have not had part of our survey program before, and you may have it on your own properties. In fact, I have one in my own yard. It's nannyberry viburnum. And I'm going to show you in a second, but the one thing that I didn't point out in the video is right where the leaf blade is going to hit the stem. You see how there's like some wings to it, like almost that leaf stalk and petiole has a little bit of like leafy, wavy edges to it. So as I show you in the video next, I want you to pay attention to that. But I found this out just driving the other day. And again, remember what you're looking for, those little flower clusters. And I just had to pull over, take a video because, you know, I love doing this stuff. So I'll show you what I found. Okay, here we go. There's your nannyberry and how to find it.
Driving through a natural area, and I had to stop because I saw two beautiful viburnums on my way in this natural area here. So I wanted to show you one of them, a beautiful native viburnum called nannyberry. And you can see it here. It's got the typical leaf, you know, the typical flower clusters in between the opposite leaves here. These are going to be like a creamy white. Eventually.
So just look at this leaf stalk. You see how it's really broad and wide for each of them where they're coming out opposite. And again, you can see this from the roadside, and it's going to be found on the trails too.
Once they are in full bloom. And the main thing about nannyberry that is different than some of the other ones I've been showing you are its toothed pattern on the outside. You see how like sharply serrated that is? It almost looks like a saw you would cut with you cut wood with or something.
It almost looks like a circular saw to me. I'm not handy, but I think that's kind of like a saw blade, you know? See how this almost looks like it would be rotating and something you'd use in a wood shop.
Like look at those little teeth on the outside of it. So that is a distinctive feature of the nannyberry. You can see how it's growing a bit as a shrub here, kind of sprawling out over this area. You can see it a little bit behind there too. And then right next to it is the arrowwood viburnum. So you can see the difference here. You see the difference in the teeth, right, between the two. This is much more like deeper grooves on the teeth. It's very like the leaves are a little bit bigger here than on the nannyberry. And again, the flower clusters coming up.
So it was awesome. Two natives just right there, like doing really well in a very disturbed habitat. So I'm telling you, they're out there. Just it's really fun to search for. And again, just trying to do some repetition here, but so that you can help remember some of these. But the nannyberry, again, looking for those really toothed, almost like circular saw edges, and the winged petioles or the winged leaf stalks. Okay. Also, it's apparently the mature fruits. If you have nannyberry in your house, a decayed smell of sheep I haven't experienced this before, but maybe you have it on your property. It's usually found in more wetter habitats. So if you have a trail section near a pond or something, you may find nannyberry. All right, another great one that I'm about to show you here is black haw viburnum, and I would say out of all the native viburnums, you're most likely going to find this one. I find that this does really, really well in disturbed habitats. I see it all the time, and I'm really hoping that you can see it on the trails as well. And it, so that we are looking for some natives that are out there with likelihood of finding them. So I'm going to show you a video on this. And again, it's going to be more like toothed margins again, but there's one distinctive feature of black haw. And I just filmed this the other day that you'll see. Let's see if I can find it. 206. All right, still nannyberry. Give me a second. All right.
This is a really beautiful native plant. And I just want to highlight some of the features. Of course, with the viburnums, you're looking for the opposite leaf structure. You see how those leaves are coming opposite one another. And then that beautiful flower cluster up top, right? That is a hallmark.
All right. So this is your black haw viburnum and a really good look at it. And again, I was just out walking and I saw this flower cluster. I'm like, I got to go figure out what it is.
Mark of the viburnums. And you can see just what a beautiful flower cluster this is. No reason to put in some invasive viburnums and shrubs into your own property when you got something as pretty as this. And the main feature of the black haw viburnum that we are looking at here is that you see that white mid-vein there, especially if I kind of zoom away a little bit.
Right here, right above my thumb, it's like almost like a white stripe right down the middle. And then the other thing I'm about to point out here is just like tooth margins, but it's not nearly as like circular saw looking like the nannyberry is. But it's really this white mid vein, and then you're going to see like the leaf stalks on this are typically red.
And some really fine teeth that are along the margins. You see how it's a little bit serrated, but it's really that white mid vein. And then the base of the leaf stalk you can see is red, and then it kind of turns
reddish right there, and then the white stripe. That's the dead giveaway. Are those two things
into that white mid vein. So that's how you know you were looking at a black haw viburnum. And I would say out of all the viburnums, I see this one really doing the best in our in the Northeast and the part of New York and northern New Jersey, and really kind of doing really well even in disturbed or disrupted habitats like we're seeing here with other invasives. It can really do a nice job of competing, and something that we want to promote and take note of along the trail system.
All right, so that's we're almost rounding out the viburnums. You're learning so much about viburnums tonight, but the last two that I want to cover are beautiful ones. And I just went out to the AT the other day and found maple leaf viburnum, and I'll show you the video of what I took the other day. But essentially, if you see a viburnum with the opposite leaf structure and then having almost looks like a maple leaf structure, but they're coming out with a flower cluster in the middle, it's most likely going to be a native viburnum. But there's two different types that have that like maple leaf shape to it that you may find. Okay, so one of them is the maple leaf viburnum. All right, and that's going to have, if you look at the base of the leaf, and I'm about to show you in the video here, right, not at where the bud is, but right at the base of the leaf, there are no little glands or warts. But on the high bush cranberry viburnum, again, maple leaf shape, okay, and you can see over here, you look right here at the base of the leaf blade, you're going to find little bumps, almost like warts at the bottom. Either way, you've got yourself a native viburnum. And if you go out and you see the remnants of the berries, the maple leaf viburnum is going to be blue or black. And then the cranberry, so-called, it's not really a cranberry, but the high bush cranberry viburnum is going to have red berries just like a cranberry. That's a great way of remembering it. But I wanted to, again, show you a video of what I took the other day when I was out on the AT, just because I think it's nice to see what these look like out in real life, I guess. So let's see, looking for a maple leaf shape. Now, I will say that maple trees also have opposite leaf structure. So you have to find the opposite leaf structure with the flower cluster to know it's a viburnum and not like a sapling.
That I have found a viburnum haven, a native viburnum haven. There you have it. Here I am trailside, and I am excited to say that I have found a viburnum haven, a native viburnum haven, And I want to show you some of the differences between them, how to tell them apart, and what we might be looking for. So the first thing you want to look for, are the maple leaf shape to it. And you see how it's got these distinctive lobes on it? So I know most likely I am looking at a native viburnum. I'll tell you some of the differences to look for, but you see, this is very, very similar to a kind of a red maple leaf shape, 3 distinct lobes to it. And how do I know it's not like a maple tree? Well, you've got the clustered flowers that are right in the middle of this. You see how those leaves are coming out opposite, and then the cluster of what are going to be flowers very soon. 3 lobes. I feel the leaf on this is actually kind of a little bit soft, really well defined veins. All right. And this is really cool here is you can actually see the remnants of last year's berries. You see how they are black, which is a great sign that we are looking at a maple leaf viburnum, those sort of blacker berries, the flower clusters coming out in between opposite leaves in between, and the 3 lobes on it. I've clearly got the maple leaf shape. I've got the black berries here.
So now I'm going to show you the difference between that and a high bush cranberry in a second here. Okay.
Again, the blackberries are indicative of the maple leaf viburnum. But if you take a look at my hands here, and I look at the base of that leaf stalk, right there where my...
Right here is where you're looking. Not where the 2 leaf stalks meet in the middle, but right under the blade. There is no glands there, no bumps at all.
Finger is. And you see that long petiole that's coming from the base of the leaf blade? I see absolutely no glands there. It's a little hairy, and I'm talking right just like northeast of where my thumb is, where my middle finger is, right? There are no glands on that. I'm going to put that right next to an American cranberry bush. You can see I've got the lobes of the maple leaf here, right? And I know it's a viburnum again because of these. If I look at the American cranberry bush over here, I've got those flower clusters that are coming out from opposite leaves that look like maple leaves, right? But if I look at the American cranberry bush, which is right next to that maple leaf viburnum, look at those.
You see it? They look like little dots, like almost like warts on at the base of the leaf.
Bumps and nodules right where my finger is. If I zoom in even closer, you see they almost look like little warts at the base.
And I'm not talking about these things here at the base. I'm talking about that right there. And that's it. You know, I hope, you know, and again, these are just to have fun exploring. I mean, I love this stuff. And, you know, if you can find these viburnums and tell these subtle differences between them, it's awesome. I mean, this is just something we're adding to the survey program this year that we think will be fun for you. It's just really just look into the viburnums in general. And just look for those flower clusters. And if you see if you can tell the difference between them. These are hopefully, I think once you commit it to memory and have the guides with you, it'll be a fun exploration to kind of push yourself. And I think you're going to start to realize that there are a lot of beautiful native plants that are out on our trail system, and not just always be focusing on the invasive ones that we are, you know, concerned about. All righty. So enough about viburnums. We're moving on to invasive species number 3. Invasive species number 1 was the linden viburnum. Invasive species number 2 was Siebold's viburnum. And now we're on to invasive species number 3. And the reason why I'm putting this third is that we are going to continue with a theme here. Japanese spiraea has the same type of arrangement of a flower cluster right in the middle of, you know, something coming up in a flower or umbel-like flower theme. So, and this is a great one to be looking for. This is an emerging species in the lower Hudson region, and you may even have it on your own property and not realize that this is escaping cultivation. And we think it's very underreported in northern New Jersey in the lower Hudson Valley, and we need your help to make sure, like, how fast is it spreading and how much has it gotten out. Bottom line is that the way you know it's not a viburnum, okay, is that spiraea has alternating leaves. So look at this picture here. You see how these leaves are not coming out opposite one another? They're alternating. So here, and then a little bit of stem, then here, left, then right. They're not coming out opposite one another. And you'll also notice that it's very, very sharply toothed on the margins. And here's the obvious difference. In June, you're going to see these flower clusters. They are bright pink and very like almost like hairy looking. The cool thing is that if you don't go out this month, but you go out later in the year after it's lost its flowers, you'll still see the brown seeds of the flower cluster in between. It should be obvious, even if it's not pink, you'll still see like the seed clusters remain almost the rest of the year. So another thing to look for. Now, I've done a lot of the videos up to this point, but this is Christy's turn. She did a wonderful video on this for an EcoQuest challenge that was in June, and I'm going to introduce you to Japanese spiraea through some photos in addition to that PowerPoint slide. So here we go. Christy's going to take it away here.
During this month's Lower Hudson Prism's Invasive Strike Force EcoQuest Challenge, we're going to learn to spy Japanese spiraea. Japanese spiraea, or Spiraea japonica, is also known as Japanese meadowsweet and Korean spiraea, and is native to Japan, China, and Korea. It is an emerging invasive species in the Lower Hudson region of New York.
So this is like a map that we can use of where we have found
located across the state.
There we go. Where we have found some of the populations. These are called hexagons, and it's not just like there's one here, there's one there. Depending on the size of that dot, there's going to be some populations. But you can see there's not necessarily a lot of reporting, but we get a lot of anecdotal stories of spiraea being found along our trail system and are very concerned about this. And this is why we need your help, because it's increasingly being found, but we need like a more systematic way of reporting it along our trails. And it's a great month to do it again, because you'll see the pink flowers.
Japanese spiraea is a perennial deciduous shrub that can grow to a height of 4 to 6 feet and prefers wetter soil and full sun, though can tolerate partial shade. To identify Japanese spiraea, be on the lookout for its eye-catching rosy pink flowers in broad clusters at the end of a long, alternate-leafed stem. The stem itself is woody, slender, and reddish-brown, and sometimes hairy, while the leaves are oval-shaped with a toothy edge and are about 1 to 3 inches in.
I mean, you can really see it's like a very serrated knife look to the edges. It's very sharply. It looks very sharp almost.
This shrub grows in an upright, low, and broadly mounded form, creating a dense thicket of thin, wiry stems. This species is especially threatening because it can invade a variety of habitats, from wet riparian areas to forests and even fields. A native lookalike is white meadowsweet. White meadowsweet.
So again, this is called the Japanese meadowsweet. Was Japanese spiraea is another name for it, but you can see it's not the native lookalike. The white meadowsweet the flower cluster doesn't look like it at all, because remember, we're talking about with Japanese spiraea as being like a flower cluster like this. This just grows almost straight up like a cone.
Sweet can be identified by its 5-petaled white or pinkish flowers, which appear in cone-shaped clusters. Another native lookalike is steeplebush, which lives up to its name with its spike-like clusters of deep pink flowers.
And while it's deep pink flowers, you can see this is more of a meadow species and just really kind of grows like almost like just kind of straight up versus the cluster of Japanese spiraea.
Is towering above its stems, setting it apart from Japanese spirea's broader flower display. Identification is the first step toward plant control. Now that you can properly ID this species.
All right, so there you have it. It's this should be an easy one for y'all, especially if you go out in the next in June. You should be able to see these pink flowers, and just know that it's an emerging invasive species in our area. And if you do have it on your property, don't sweat it, but just know it is one of those that is escaping cultivation, and you should be very careful and think about potentially removing it from your own property if you do have it there. All righty, moving along. Y'all ready for invasive species number 4 and 5? For those who have been returning surveyors for a long time, we are bringing back the honeysuckles. Invasive honeysuckles are very prevalent in our area, and we wanted to bring back an invasive species or two that you would be able to find a little bit more commonly than some of the ones we've been focusing on in the past couple of years. And also because the honeysuckles are sort of an interesting one because they do provide cover for some of the species like New England cottontail that we are focusing on. Is a native species that is a protected species in New York. So just because, we often think of just invasives, we just need to remove them right away. But often it is complicated, and honeysuckles are the ones that do provide some habitat and some food, but not nearly as good and nutritious of a food resource as some of the native shrubs that we have in our region. So we're bringing back the honeysuckles, everyone, and they're pretty obvious and very prevalent in our region. We're going to look in a little bit more detail and challenge y'all to see if you can tell some of the differences between the invasive ones. There are some native honeysuckles, but there's also some subtle differences between some of the invasive ones as well. So in the past, we've just reported as basically invasive bush honeysuckles. And that is because there are several species of invasive honeysuckles in our region. And the main thing that you are looking for is, again, opposite leaf structure and these flowers on it that almost look like peeled bananas. And I will show you a closer picture of that in a second. But to me, the opposite leaf structure of a bush honeysuckle almost looks like propellers on an airplane. You see how, or like a bow tie appearance along almost like a reddish stem to it. And you all may know that there is a honeysuckle vine that, again, looks very similar to this, but it grows like a vine and not like a bush or a shrub. So just remember, we are looking for the bush honeysuckles this year. Here's a great look at it between. Again, you've got the stem here with opposite leaf arrangement, again, looking like propellers or a bow tie, and everything is in pairs. The flowers are in pairs. The berries are in pairs and paired along those opposite leaves there. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but doesn't that look like a peeled banana? I think the flowers look like that. They smell really good, and they're kind of on the edge of like yellow or white typically in our region, but opposite leaf arrangement and that kind of peeled banana flower look to it. Now here we go. Here's the details that we didn't do in the last survey from like a couple of years ago, and for those of you who've been surveying for a while. I'm going to push you all to see if you can tell the differences between these. Okay. In our area, there are 3 main species, 2 of which are really hybridized. So there's Morrow's honeysuckle and Tatarian that were our own separate species, but have been so convoluted and breeding together and are capable of breeding together that they form like what is called a hybrid swarm. So if Morrow's and Tatarian come together, it kind of creates what's kind of a new look called a Bell's honeysuckle. There's really no way of telling unless you do genetic analysis of whether you've got a pure Morrow's, Tatarian, or some hybrid between them. But the basic gist of what you are looking for is if it's on more side of this side of the spectrum, with the Morrow's honeysuckle, and if you use Seek, it'll go to more Morrow's honeysuckle. Those are going to feel very, very soft. The leaves of this type of honeysuckle on this more like hybrid side are going to be very, very soft and a rounded end to it. But there is another distinct species found in our region called Amur honeysuckle. The leaves are not soft. They feel like almost like fake plasticky. And you can see, and I'll show you a video of it in a second, really extended tips, almost looks like a bird's beak to it. And I'll show you a video in a second. So you're either going to be posting as this more like hybrid species of invasive honeysuckle or an Amur honeysuckle, which has the really elongated tips. And I thought this would be a cool challenge to people who have been reporting on invasive honeysuckles for a while. The best thing I can do is show you a video, and you'll really see the difference in a second of something that I just collected the other day. So here we go. Hopefully I can find it here. And getting to it right there. A good look at a bush honeysuckle. You can see its kind of growth pattern here and a lot of flowers. So really pretty, but unfortunately it's very invasive, and it can really take over an area and outcompete things around it. If I come in a little bit closer,
You can really kind of look at the detail of some of the flowers. So what you see that I'm holding here, you can see the paired flowers that are along the paired kind of oblong oval shaped leaves here. You see how they're coming out opposite of one another. And if you look at that reddish stem there, you can see that it's got almost like whitish tints to it, like a
All right. So again, very similar to that linden viburnum. You know, I was like very finely hairy, like the Morrow's honeysuckle, like that side of the hybrid one, or Morrow's if it is purely Morrow's, it's going to be very hairy. I'm feeling the leaves here. It's a very hairy feel to it. You can see it along the stems, almost like a reddish stem, finish hairs. You will definitely be able to tell the difference between this type of invasive honeysuckle and the amber honeysuckle, which I'll show you in a second.
Along that reddish stem, those fine white hairs. And if I'm feeling the leaves on this, it is a little bit hairy. And you can feel that it's kind of like just has a bit of a fuzzy quality to it, which kind of means that it's more along the lines of a Morrow's honeysuckle than it is a Tartarian, you know, and it certainly does not have the extended tip that the amber honeysuckle has. You can see it does come to a point, but it's not really elongated or extended, and you can see the finest white hairs on it as well. So more along the lines of Morrow's honeysuckle. Right behind this garlic mustard here is a big bush honeysuckle. And this is a really great example of all the pairings of the opposite leaves and then the pairings of the flowers that are coming off, you know, right at where those opposite leaves are coming off of one another. But the question is, if you wanted to push yourself, what type of honeysuckle is this? And unlike the kind of the Morrow's or Tartarian,
I mean, just look at that elongated tip. Doesn't that look like a bird's beak? Like if that is a beak right there and there's the bird's head, I mean, it's not anything like the Morrow's honeysuckle when we were looking at it before. Let me just go back a little bit. You see how it's the Morrow's, it's very soft and it does not have that really elongated tip to it.
Morrow's
Right?
honeysuckle than it is a Tartarian.
Okay.
Along the lines of Morrow's, the pairings of the opposite leaves and
So
then
back to
the
amber.
pairings of the flowers that are coming off, you know, right at where those opposite leaves are coming off of one another. But the question is, if you wanted to push yourself, what type of honeysuckle is this? And unlike the kind of the Morrow's or Tartarian that had more eyeball shaped, look at this elongated tip of what is called amber
It's
honeysuckle.
the bird's
You
beak.
can see it almost looks like a bird's head, kind of that beak almost sticking out. That's how elongated that edge is, or this like.
And if you look really closely, there is like hairs, like it is like does have a little bit of hair on it, but when you're feeling it, it's very plasticky. It feels totally different than the velvety feel of like a Morrow's honeysuckle.
Tip of this leaf, and if I feel it, it's a little bit rougher than the Morrow's honeysuckle, or you know that hybrid honeysuckle that I showed you before. And you can see if you look closely, you can kind of see that there is that whitish hairs that are on the stems there, but it's not nearly, it doesn't feel as soft or hairy. It's coarser. It's just kind of like a little bit rougher, I would say, more glossy, and certainly that elongated tip was not present in.
All right, so I don't know. It's a challenge to y'all. See if you can figure this out and see, push yourselves to kind of tell some of the differences. And again, you're going to see a range between the whitish flowers, sometimes a little bit more on the yellowish side as they age. But, you know, can you tell the difference between this kind of like this hybridized honeysuckle over here and then the amber honeysuckle, which has the more elongated tips? So just kind of a fun challenge for you to see if we can report on these invasives. All right, now that is different than there are some native honeysuckles. Now, they are not super common in our area, but if you really wanted to know the difference between whether you were looking at one of these invasive honeysuckles and some of the natives that we have around here, the real surefire way to know is if you had scissors and you cut into it. The invasive honeysuckles almost look like a straw. There's like a brownish pith that is hollow, almost like a brown ring and then hollow in the middle of it. That's way you know you definitely have an invasive honeysuckle. Now, the native honeysuckles, this is a native northern bush honeysuckle. It's obvious that you're looking at a native honeysuckle because it has a serrated edge to the leaves versus all of these are smooth edges to it. Even the amber is just a smooth edge. But the native honeysuckles either have a toothed margin to it, and very elongated, and a very solid pith. See how there's no hole in the middle? Now, there's also a native fly honeysuckle, which doesn't have serrated edges, but it's like very obvious, like coarse hairs that are on the outside that are coming up that almost like look like teeth on it. That's a native fly honeysuckle, but the native bush honeysuckle has serrated margins on its leaves. All right, you'll learn a little bit more about honeysuckles than we have in the past. So fun challenge again. All right, last but not least, I am going to tell you a little bit about beech leaf disease. So we have been working on this as a group for a long time now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history. It can be very depressing if you allow it to be, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of great people that are working on this right now, and it is the power of the partnership and the link between the volunteer network and the really smart, motivated, passionate, volunteer communities talking with one another, but also the land managers that are working on this problem and the partnership that comes with the Lower Hudson Prism. So you may have, I'm sure you have seen this, but maybe not known what it is, but beech leaf disease is rampant in our area, particularly in Westchester. It is caused by an invasive nematode that burrows into the buds and impacts photosynthesis, causing initially this banding pattern. So if you've got yourself and you know what to look for in a beech tree, and I'll teach you what to even look for to know that you're looking at a beech in the first place, that the early symptoms are going to include this striped pattern to the leaves. And then eventually that tissue thickening can get so bad that it causes almost like the whole thing just turns a dark green and kind of wrinkles up like this. They will eventually abort the buds. The leaves will curl, become dark and leathery. And unfortunately, we are starting to see mortality, not just like impacts of symptoms, but almost every tree, if you have it in one place, it'll eventually spread the symptoms, and then trees next to it all going to have the same problem. This was a disease that was first discovered in 2012 that was found out in the Midwest. So the way to navigate through this map that I'm showing you here is that the yellows and blues are where it originated, and then the purples and pinks are from the last 3 or 4 years. So this is a great example of something that probably spread from the Midwest, not naturally east. This was probably transmitted through the nursery trade by selling beech trees from this region over to the metropolitan region. And now you've got an issue where it is spreading rapidly in our area, found in multiple states, and causing a lot of problems. And the future of beeches in our region is really up in the air right now. If you have been on a walk in northern New Jersey or in the Lower Hudson region, this could be what you are looking at. This is what healthy beech canopy looks like. All right, it's going to look like this. But what we are dealing with in our region right now is curling up leaves, lots of this banding pattern, and getting to the point, if it's progressed enough, that there is no canopy, very little canopy, just all light just coming down. This is not the fall. This is actually a picture taken by Christy in the growing season, but just no canopy because of the impacts on the leaves. So the first thing I'm going to do before we get into some of the response and some of the hope that we have with this disease is to, first of all, make sure, do you know how to identify a beech tree? And then secondly, do you know the symptoms of BLD and how progressed it is? Because that's going to be important to some of our reporting. So let's get into it. Oh, shoot, I didn't have it loaded. Give me a second here. Now I got to find it. Okay, here we go. An ad is probably going to play it, and I didn't load this before, so my apologies. But we're actually doing really well on time, so just hang in there a little bit. A little stretch or something.
So this video is going to do a little bit of a reminder as to how to ID beech trees through both its leaves and its trunk.
I'm gonna have to start
then
this over again so I can get to full screen. Hold on. Just acting a little slow. Ah, come on. Let's cooperate. Might just have to play it on the screen in small. Hold on. Bring you through how to identify beech leaf disease and help us combat that threat in our region. The first sign to look for that you're looking at a beech tree and not another type of tree is its bark. There's got to be a way of doing this. Hold on. There we go. Now we're good. A lot of people liken the bark of a beech tree to almost like elephant legs. You can see why. It's got like a grayish appearance to it. And as I'm feeling it, it's very, very smooth. Unfortunately, a lot of, you get a lot of carvings and stuff on the sides of beech trees, which we are not promoting at all. But again, it's just got this like very smooth appearance to it. It almost looks just like a little joint there of an elephant leg or something. So that's one of the first features to be on the lookout for. Also, its leaves, because sometimes, especially with saplings and stuff, you may not get that sort of smooth bark, but as it matures, it becomes even more obvious. But if you look at the beech leaf itself, there's a little trick that I'll have you guys think of. So when you think of beech and like going to the beach and waves, you see how this leaf right here, if you look at the surface of it where my finger's coming up there, doesn't that look like little wave crests, like you're going to the beach? And that's a little trick that I use. It looks like little wave crests like you would see if you did a little like artistic rendering of what waves might look like. All right, so that's two things. Is really a kind of that smooth elephant skin bark, and then the wave crest like a beech. And this is actually a healthy asymptomatic looking leaf. Does not have beech leaf disease. The tree probably does, but these leaves are asymptomatic at this point. So the question is, how do you know that now that we know how to look at the beech leaf, how do you look for beech leaf disease? And really what you need to do is get below that beech tree and look up into the canopy and scan the canopy. Look for, it's pretty obvious here, right? This is a shot I took in Granite Mountain, which is infected with beech leaf disease up in Putnam County. And you can just see the zebra-like striping to it. And then some of the leaves have it. You get as obvious like right here, but some of the leaves do not. So let me just play this through so you can see some of the differences. Of scanning the canopy and sort of that beautiful, brilliant look you have to the canopy as you're looking up while you're hiking. Well, do you notice something a little bit off and strange about that as I'm looking up into the canopy here? Take a look at some of these leaves here. Do you see that striping that's appearing as you're looking up? And then I also want to point out that some of the symptoms are progressed. So obviously there's the striping, but you see these leaves in behind it here that are really curled up. And I'm gonna get right in there here. And after just wanted to let you know that after I did this, I had to totally sanitize my hands from touching this because you don't want to spread this around. So just make sure that if you're touching the leaves, to make sure that you're like got hand sanitizer on you so it kills it in case the worms end up on your hand. Progressed version of beech. Here we go. And we need your help in mapping this. Here's a look at a really progressed version of beech leaf disease. You can see that that darkness becomes like more prevalent throughout the leaf itself. Although even if you looked at up through light up towards the canopy, you'd still probably see a bit of striping. But this is what it looks like when it's really progressed, like dark, crinkly, very, very thickened. And as I'm touching it, it almost feels like rawhide. Like, I mean, it is very, very thick. And what I didn't mention before is that this disease, most scientists will agree, is. And I just kind of go into talking a little bit about the nematodes, and we've learned a lot about it. And we really think there's a very direct link between how it's impacting photosynthesis and the presence of these nematode worms. So, and since that video was filmed, it's been spreading fast, and really necessitated a very rapid response from our partnership, local land managers, and engaged community members like yourself. We have been finding that beech leaf disease is spreading much faster here in the lower Hudson Valley in northern New Jersey than it ever was in Ohio. And we're getting to a mortality quicker. We think it's because here, being in the metropolitan area, there's a lot of stressors by living in, so close to a city. We have beech bark disease, which is another type of, disease that impacts beech. High invasives pressure. There's a lot of invasive species because we're near port cities. And it's, meaning that we have to act quickly, and it has to be now. And our main focus in this region is not necessarily on curing the beech trees from beech leaf disease, because there is no known cure right now. It's really about maintaining forest integrity and making sure that whatever is coming up in the next generation, as we lose the beech canopy, that is healthy and native and provides a home, sustenance for wildlife, and to make sure that the ecosystem function is intact. And from our PRISM partnership, there's a small coalition of organizations that are our partners working together on this that is called the Beech Leaf Disease Coalition, and have done incredible work in our region and really pioneering the response in our area and leading the nation, really, in how we are putting together a management response. And it all starts from volunteer community effort and linking together with organizations and partnerships like Lower Hudson PRISM to make a difference. So here's our strategy. It's basically threefold. We know that beech trees are succumbing to this disease. So we need to do something about the next generation and what's happening on the forest understory as we lose the canopy. We have to make sure that when we start losing the beech canopy, that the understory is healthy. We have to make sure that invasive shrubs do not come up in this now exposed sunlight area below the beech, that we are planting with natives and making sure that the natives that are there can survive through invasive species removals in the understory. We cannot plant native plants unless we do something about deer overbrowsing, because if you put in a lot of the natural regeneration from, say, maples or some of the native understory trees that are growing without deer control, or at least some type of something to account for deer overbrowsing, we will not get anything coming back, at least trees in our region, because the deer population is so high and the browsing pressure is so high. So what we are really focusing on is restoration in beech forest areas that is going to maintain ecological function with some sort of protection from deer overbrowsing. So what we are doing is planting a lot of trees of non-beech seedlings, and a palette and species of options have been drafted and tested by our coalition, putting them in with tree tubing or installing deer fences, which I'll talk about in a second, while the research part of how to create a cure or some sort of management option for beech leaf disease comes into being. We're trying different watering, soil amendment experiments to see if we can if some of these trees can withstand this sort of invasion from beech leaf disease. But in the meantime, planting native trees, protecting from deer browse. We're doing a lot of long-term monitoring in the area. So we're monitoring the planted and tube stock that we are putting into the ground, and doing long-term monitoring plots. I know that the folks on the call have been part of establishing these long-term plots to see how the disease is progressing and what we can do. We're working with New York State DEC on that. Also just mapping. So a lot of our partners have done really great work with GIS and mapping the progression of the disease. The more we can learn about it, the better equipped we will be for a long-term solution. So mapping, monitoring is extremely important. So even though we don't have the answers right now, that's how we get to the answers. I said before that we have created some really good plots that have deer exclusion fencing, so that we are getting in areas that are impacted by beech leaf disease, that we are getting good regeneration from native plants from our planting, but also making sure that deer are not getting at whatever's growing out until they get past deer browsing pressure. We even made a documentary on how to install and maintain deer fences that we provided to our partners, and have done a lot of these trainings to volunteers, municipal and nonprofit trainings. Even created a equipment bank to pass out to partners that applied for these deer fence installations. That mini documentary that Christy was a part of filming is also available, and that was done through the Beech Leaf Disease Coalition and PRISM. And of course, you all here. We need volunteers and community members that are mapping this, and I will explain why and the direction that we are taking and why volunteers are so important in this effort. Over the past couple of years, we have mapped over 1,400 unique sites of where beech are and the degree of symptom progression that we are finding. And that is all because of this program right here that you are a part of. What you are doing and the data that you are collecting and reporting is immediately going to be leveraged up to again, this is a show of like some of the data that you'll be reporting this year. I'll get more into that in the second training, but the data that you are collecting on extent of BLD discovered, is that a beech tree right in front of me, plotting that point? Are we noticing any healthy beech that are somehow showing resistance to this? There is a lot of hope in finding those lingering trees, those healthy beech that are withstanding a lot of these the BLD symptoms, right? That's where your reporting becomes very valuable. And even if it's reporting that this beech is in rough condition, all those points from volunteers are going to be put into what is called a prioritization model. We are hoping to partner with UConn and Dr. Witharama. We've been in a lot of discussions with and using a lot of the volunteer data to basically create a large forested map of where beech stands are in our region, and then using that data to then make management decisions and make priorities, like where do we want to put our efforts into saving the beech understories, where do we want to install these deer exclusion fences. And this type of modeling is, I can't reiterate enough, is so critical to good management decisions that will bring back the next generation and ensure that what is coming back is going to survive. And it cannot be done without the efforts of community members and volunteers. So all of this is leading into really good, solid efforts, cooperation between volunteers, land managers, utilization of these of this modeling and remote sensing, so that we can make smart decisions and best uses of our resources, both people wise and money wise, to do something about this disease as the research catches up to basically found a cure or a management option. So it really is very, very powerful to work with such organizations and volunteers that we can come up with good solutions and make sure that we've got healthy forests moving forward. So that's it for the training tonight. I hope you have found that it really is the power of people to connect. I know it might just be you on a trail section reporting, but there are many more like you that are reporting and communicating with us. And that dialogue is so important to making a difference to saving our forests, preventing from the spread of invasive species, and solving complex issues like beech leaf disease. So the next steps are that I will be in touch. There's going to be a follow-up live stream webinar that's going to walk you through some of the data collection and reporting procedures. And once you've viewed and attended that second webinar, you're going to be ready for a field assignment. And that's where the really fun begins. The assignment could be in a park that's convenient to you in your home. You're going to have the full summer and early fall to complete it. So after this training, you know what the species are that we are looking for. We'll provide the data sheets. We're going to provide nice, colorful guides, a recording of this webinar here tonight. And you're going to have the whole summer, if you want, to go complete your trail assignment. Typically, trail assignments are 1 to 2 mile section of trail, and they could be a part that's convenient to your home, or a park that you're just interested in exploring and learning more about and giving back to. So it's really up to you, and Christy and I will work together on your assignments to set you up with something that works for you or your family or your partner. And of course, at the end, you're going to get a cool volunteer appreciation gift and many thanks and congratulations. So just be on the lookout for signing up for that part 2 for data collection. And then we'll shortly after that, starting in June, going to be sending you an assignment. And, many of our volunteers just do one, but many go on to do many of these because they just really enjoy the process of seeking and exploring and learning about these natural areas. So I hope you will be on board with us. I can't thank you all enough for being here tonight and for really kind of doing this collective endeavor together. And I hope you feel inspired by the number of people who showed up here tonight and are part of this this process to help us out. So thank you again. I will take questions at the end, but I will stop the recording here and make this available for you all moving forward. Thank you again for attending tonight. I'm here for the next 15 minutes. If you all have questions,